Good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's class. We'll just give 1 to 2 minutes for our facilitator to join in before we go ahead. Please remember to put your names in the chat box and also inform your party members that it's time for class so they can sign in on time. Thank you very much and see you soon.
Okay, while we wait for the facilitator, I think I can just present the certificate of return to the president of the cohort XIV. I can see he's in the room. So I'll just bring that up now. All right, so this certificate of return is presented to Cletus Odreiso Opo of New Nigerian People's Party. You've been elected to the office of the president of the cohort XIV at the election held on the 21st day of June 2024. So congratulations to you, Mr. President, and congratulations to your party as a whole, NNPP. You can unmute and just accept the certificate.
ECN. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, my party, NNPP, for this wonderful feat. I really appreciate everyone for participating in the election, and I really appreciate my party for the efforts they put in bringing this home to our party. I also want to appreciate especially the Director General of ECN for this great platform that has given us this opportunity today. Thank you, everyone. In my speech, I want to also thank all the participants in this cohort for their effort in every assignment, in every project that is given us. And I want to promise ECN that by this mantra of leadership invested on me today, I will make sure I project ECN to Nigerians that are yet to know about ECN, and also to the level that I can, to make sure that even the neighboring countries around Nigeria can also get involved and know what ECN is all about. Thank you, and thank you so much. God bless ECN and God bless NNPP. Thank you.
All right, thank you, and congratulations again, Mr. President. So I think our facilitator is in the room, so we can continue with the class. Chalia, you can take over.
Thank you very much, Didi, and congratulations, NNPP, for job well done. So we have our facilitator in the class this evening, taking us on the role of tax and governance, Mr. Joe Mijinyawa. So I'll just read a brief bio of our facilitator before we move ahead. Joe Mijinyawa is a Nigerian born in Zaria. He started schooling in Zaria, Kaduna State, and proceeded to Ilorin, Kwara State. Later, he studied sociology at ABU Zaria and did his NYC in Enugu State. Joe worked at First Bank of Nigeria PLC for over 12 years. He's currently an ICANN student member. Joe is passionate about good governance at every level. He enjoys reading, teaching, and engaging in meaningful conversations. So, ladies and gentlemen, our facilitator for this evening, Mr. Joseph Ijiyawa. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Sorry for the lateness. I usually don't do this, but it happened unconsciously today. Sorry for that. Good evening, everyone. My name is Joe Mijinyawa, as she has introduced, and I'll be taking us on understanding the role of tax in governance.
Sorry, sir, we can't hear you. You're breaking.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, you can hear you now.
Okay. Sorry, who is sharing the screen? Or should I? I think I'll need the assistance from your end.
I'm happy to do that.
All right, all right. All right, so while the screen is being shared, I would quickly just start by talking about tax, what it means, and what is expected of us in politics. Now, in governance, generally, you would always ask yourself about what ways do the government, or how does the government raise those funds that it uses in doing its business? And the only way, and one of the major ways rather, not the only way, is tax. And in the peculiar case of Nigeria today, we would agree that taxation has come to stay. And that is the mainstay of the economy, because I think for the past over 3 years, NNPC has not been remitting as expected from our oil revenues. And so you would know that the government has no other option than to ensure that people are being taxed. Now, tax is the means through which the government is funded, and it remains the main source of income for the government, among other sources. You would also wonder why certain taxes are levied. And many of us have asked questions about what is government doing with our taxes. The questions and fears are not out of place, but there are different questions we should ask ourselves. If today, you as a politician, you find yourself in the shoes of a governor, what will you do differently? Will you stop taxing people? If you are an advisor to government today, would you advise the government to do something different? What are the other means of getting these funds to run the government? And so the priorities generally as a people might not actually align specifically with that of the government, because the government is saddled with a very onerous task of a lot. The government has a lot to cater for. And so because of that, you would find out that if, for instance, I have infrastructure in front of my house, I have water, I have light, I have everything, someone somewhere else is suffering from insecurity, for instance. And so it depends on the priorities of the government at the time of discussion. And so sometimes we find ourselves asking ourselves, what are they even doing with this? The cost of governance is too high. Bottom line is, tax is the only means by which the government raises those funds and is able to do a lot. Now, as a people, I would always say this, that our learning process as individuals, as a sociologist, I would say the family is the bedrock of the society. And coming from that angle, you would understand that whatever you learn from your home is what makes you out there. And so it gives me an outlook to two concepts I always use, which are the two G's and the two T's. The first G is God, the second is government, the first T is tithes, the second T is tax. Growing up, which one were you more aware of? And which one do you believe more in? I'm sure you would be able to answer those questions at your own level to know that in our climb, our parents never taught us nothing about taxation. So we just always have this feeling that the government is just trying to exploit people. The government is not doing much. But on the other hand, we don't see anything wrong. On the other hand, I wouldn't want to delve into that. But those are things that we should look at, because in governance, you would have to look at it holistically. And definitely, you agree with me that the priority in getting funds in governance is definitely going to be tax. Now, we would also look at the objectives at the end of this. We should be able to see the reasons for tax and taxation, the need for government to collect taxes, who should collect what tax, because we have different levels of taxation in the country, and what are the basic principles of a good tax system, the sources of our tax laws in Nigeria. So that basically when we're talking about taxation, we should be able to defend it to say that, yes, as a people or as someone in governance, for instance, you should be able to defend it to say, this is the reason why this is being done. Now, we have different versions of definitions of tax. Some people would say money that you have to pay to the government so that it can pay for public services. Another one would say monetary charge imposed by the government on persons, entities, and properties levied to yield public revenue. An enforced proportional contribution from persons and property levied by the state by virtue of its sovereignty for the support of government and for all public needs. We have various other definitions of taxation, but we can now sum it up that tax can therefore be described as a form of levy imposed on all residents living in and as well as non-residents doing business. We didn't look at non-residents, we're talking of foreigners doing business in Nigeria, for instance. There's definitely a type of tax that you would have to pay because country. So for that portion that is being run within Nigeria, they would have to pay taxes on them. For instance, you have airlines, shipping lines, telecoms that have their international companies. They run businesses in different countries, but that which they do in Nigeria, Nigeria will have to tax that particular type of tax. So the process of levying and collection of tax from taxpayers is what is known as taxation. Now, looking at governance, we'll be looking at it as a term, and it's all about monitoring and controlling of decisions, as well as giving leadership and direction. So in whose interest is the country governed? Definitely we'll say the populace. Who has the power to make decisions for the country? And how is this power used? These are questions that are open-ended with different views. People have different explanations to them. But the bottom line is, who is held responsible for anything that goes on within a country? For instance, you would say, okay, in a Nigerian state, for instance, where taxes have been collected, what does the governor do with the taxes? Of course, that is where they are able to do a lot other infrastructural developments, because one of the other sources is for them to go into debt. Other sources are the federation account, the portion from the federation account, which is still coming from taxes and revenues generated by the federal government. Now, in Nigeria, for instance, in our tax system, we've had this over and over the years. For instance, in the Igbo land, they had their own synonymous type of taxes, which the Obas were collecting from the populace. We have in the Yoruba land, the Ishakole and the rest. And in the northern part, we have the Kudinkasa, the Shuka, and different other taxes that were levied even before the creation of the Nigerian state as we know today. Now, all these levies and taxes were used by the chiefs and the Obas and the Ezes, the Obis, to fortify their territories, to buy ammunition, to give to the needy, who would be used, who will be taxed to fight for the territory when the need arises and all that. The taxes were levied on even palm fruits, agricultural produces and all that, just so that they have more. And if you remember, in the pre-colonial days, the more you have, the more powerful you are. So they made sure they collected these taxes from the people in order to ensure that they were able to protect their territories. On the advent of the colonialists in Nigeria, they realized that, okay, we already have this system, and which was not far from what they were used to. And so they now established the Nigerian taxation laws. They started from the Act of 1861, and then by the amalgamation in 1914, they were able to come up with the Proclamation Law of 1914, the Native Law Ordinance Cap 74 of 1917, which was applicable to Western Nigeria. And then we have the Non-Natives Protectorate Tax Ordinance of 1931. We have the Taxation Ordinance of 1940 and subsequently reenacted as the Income Tax Ordinance of 1943, which is the basis in which the current day Federal Inland Revenue Service was hinged on. Over the years, they kept doing reviews and repealing the laws and making amendments, and that was what brought about the 2007 Federal Inland Revenue Service Act, which is being run by the federal government today. Now, there are different other legislations, like I've said, from the different commissions, the Rainsman Commission in 1958. We have the 1960 Constitution that came about. This led to the promulgation of the Income Tax Management 1961 and the Companies Income Tax Act of 1961, which is still in operation, but it has been amended up to 2011. And then we have the various amendments by the Finance Act of 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022. Now, I would quickly go down to looking at the objectives of taxation. One of the major objectives and the sole objective is revenue generation. It's also taxation has also always been employed to raise sufficient revenue to satisfy the needs of the government, such as provision of services like defense, law and order, health services, and education, among others. You would agree with me today that there are a lot of projects, a lot of government policies, government projects. I would still say the government projects that have been undertaken at different climes. At a point, I think they said the revenue that is expected from the tax administration might not be able to fund the budget, and that was why the government had to go into borrowing. And so that is another form of raising funds for the government. But solely, I would say a huge chunk of the Nigerian revenue today is hinged on taxes. And that's why you agree with me, if you're into business, it's not been easy. These taxes are raised on different parts of businesses. You have the value-added tax, you have the company's income tax, you have the capital gains tax, you have the personal income tax, you have what's this other one? Capital gains tax, VAT. We have stamp duties on agreements between individuals and corporates, individuals and individuals. All these transactions are hinged on one type of tax or the other. We have the Petroleum Act, which has come to stay, which is taxation on oil companies who are into exploration and all that. Then another key one is redistribution of income and wealth. Now, the burden of tax, as we know, ought to be heavier for the rich than for the poor. And so for someone who is doing business, for instance, of a turnover of above 25 billion and up to 100 million, it's been taxed at 20%, companies income tax. While those who do less than that, less than 25 million, that's turnover, are being taxed at 0%. And those above 100 million, up to the billions, are taxed at 30%. And so you can see that there's a form of redistribution of income and wealth amongst the different hierarchies of tax as it is in Nigeria. Then you can also look at it from the fact that at the end of the day, the government will not say it is catering for those that pay for taxes only, or those that are able to pay their taxes. No, it's for everybody. So there's a redistribution of income and wealth in that manner. Then the management of the economy, where the government can decide to come up with a particular tax levied on a particular product just to either discourage consumption or because there's a high level of consumption. Like in Lagos State, we have the luxury tax. The luxury tax is based on consumption of certain items within certain climes. So for those that probably would go to the highbrow areas and go to the clubs and all that, they will be charged the Lagos luxury tax, which is, I think, 5%, if I'm not mistaken. And so you would see that it's a way of managing the economy. So for he who thinks he is able to do it, will be able to go there. And then to prohibit the use of certain items, like we have the alcohol and smoking and betting, there are certain kind of taxes, levies that are placed on them so that people are not encouraged to use those particular. Is also it's a device to improve gross national income, induce economic development, and influence favorable balance of payments with other countries. So we enter into certain treaties as a result of our being part of a particular pact, like the Economic Community of West African States. There's this free movement of people and goods. And so within the region, there's this harmony that we have in terms of trade within the West African sub-region. So for us to say that we have a good tax system in a country, for instance, we would still go back to the philosopher Adam Smith of 1776, who underlisted certain characteristics that up to date are being used to measure the type of tax or taxation that is being in play, that is being used by any country. We have equity. There should be equity in taxation. There should be certainty. People should know exactly what they are being taxed for and how they are being taxed for it. It should be convenient. Just like we have today, various innovations are coming within the tax environment. There's a new software that the Federal Inland Revenue is still trying to perfect, the Tax Pro Max, which has come to stay and is actually helping them in creating more. Then we have administrative efficiency. The cost of collection should not be higher than the benefits that the government is going to get. So when you look at the administrative efficiency, there should be no bullish kind of extort. It should be simple. It should be productive. It should be flexible and stable. Now we'll look at the types of taxes. We have the proportional tax, which is at a flat rate and is on the total assessable income. Therefore, tax is proportional to the taxpayer's income. So, for instance, at a flat rate of 20%, it is a tax that whether you are, if you're earning 100,000, for instance, it's just 20%. If you're earning $1 million, it's still 20%. And so the amount the person will be paying is proportional to the amount the person is making. And then we have the progressive, which is similar to what we have in our personal income tax of today, which is pay as you earn. So the first 300 has its own rates, the second 300, the first 500, the second 500, and the first 1.6 million, it's at a rate, and then the next 3.2 million is at above 3.2 million is at a rate. So when you look at it, it's a progressive kind of tax that the more you earn, the more you pay. And so we have the regressive, which is usually pegged on the higher you pay, the less the rate. But that is not applicable anywhere in the world. It's just in principle. And then we can also look at the types of taxes in terms of the direct and indirect taxes. We have the direct taxes, which has to do with the personal income tax, the company's income tax, the capital gains tax, tertiary education tax, the petroleum profit tax, which is now the hydrocarbon tax. These are direct because it is levied at the business or the individual that is into that business. But you have the indirect taxes, which is similar to what we have in the value-added tax, the stamp duties, excise duties. The final consumer is the one that pays for it. So when you look at these different types of taxes, you would understand that the government actually is not bullying the populace per se, the way we see it, but it's more or less trying to see how it can raise revenue in such a way that it does not affect the common citizen. Now, looking at the tripod of taxation, the tax policies, you will now start to look at, okay, on what basis are we looking at this tax? The policies are general statements of intention, the thinking and the action of all concerned towards realization of the set goals. So there's an emphasis from income tax, consumption tax, there is less pursuance of tax law regime with the aim of reducing individual tax burdens, widening the tax nets so that some people don't feel they are just the ones paying the tax. Meanwhile, some people are relaxing. No, the tax authorities try to widen the scope so that more people are encouraged to pay their taxes. Then we have also part of the policies that the introduction of the self-assessment regime. The self-assessment regime is such that you, the taxpayer, would do your own assessment based on your business, since you are the one that knows your business, and then you do a voluntary submission of an assessment to the tax authorities, and that is supposed to be as truthful and as honest as it should be. So you have all these as part of the tripod of taxation under the tax policies. Then we have the tax laws. There are different tax laws that have been amended over time, up to date. The personal income tax of 2004 has amended. Companies income tax has amended 2004, capital gains tax, value-added tax, education tax act, stamp duties act, and the hydrocarbon tax of 2021, which was pushed in by the Petroleum Industry Act. It used to be petroleum profit tax, which was usually paid upfront, but the government looked at it and then came up with a part of the business is charged under the hydrocarbon tax, while a part of the business is charged based on the company's income taxes. Now, the Constitution vests the legislation of income tax, whether personal or corporate, on the federal government in order to promote uniformity. However, the three tiers of government share the administration of various taxes. The tax laws are reviewed periodically in line with the changes in social, political, and economic conditions of the country. The power to impose tax in Nigeria is within the exclusive legislative authority of the federal government, and there are various machineries set up by the government to ensure strict compliance of these laws, and then the non-compliance attracts penalties and fines. Now, when we talk about the tax administration, we're looking at how are these taxes collected? Based on the tax policies that have been implemented, the tax laws that have been brought to book, and then the bodies that are charged with the administration of tax. You have the federal, state, and local government. So at the federal level, you look at the corporate businesses, which are governed by, which are collected rather by the Federal Inland Revenue Service, Sections 1, 2, and 3 of the Federal Inland Revenue Establishment Act 2007. Then the state internal revenue services, every state has its own internal revenue service. And so they are supposed to administer the personal income tax based on the Personal Income Tax Act of 2004. And then the Local Government Revenue Committee also has its own role based on Section 90 of Personal Income Tax Act to collect taxes at that level. These our tax laws in Nigeria, for instance, have their own sources. And based on the sources, we can look at the customary laws. Like I started earlier, I told you, as a country, we had our own types of taxes that we're collecting. They had the shuka, the zakat, and the various ones. The ishakole in the west, and then in the south. And sorry, I might be sounding very tripod about Nigeria. I'm just talking about Hausa, Igbo, Yoruba. Even the other tribes, the other ethnic groups, had their own ways of levying these taxes on their populace. And it is still hinged on this same prospects of collecting based on what they believed in. I'm sure if we have an Igbira person here that knows his history well, will know that the Ata also, if I'm right, that's their paramount ruler. If Ohinoi for Igbira, Ohinoi is the one that rules over the Igbira people. They have their own peculiar type of taxes those days, which, as it is today, might have been modified into a form of local government tax or a state government tax that they are still paying, because people still go to farms, people still do hunting, people still do smaller trades within communities, and they are expected to give back to the society. Then we have statute laws, which are the laws, the legislations that brought about these taxes, as I mentioned earlier. They are supposed to give back into the tax administrators so that everybody knows that, okay, this is a law. And so if you do not do this, this is what is backing it. And so you are compelled to make sure you pay your taxes. Then we have case laws based on past judgments pronounced by superior courts of record, namely the Supreme Courts, the Appeal Courts, and the High Courts, on principles of tax laws. Like I know there's a case of a particular taxpayer that sued the Federal Inland Revenue Service because they were charging him VAT, and he was into processing of water, bottled water. And he said, no, water is a basic necessity, and you cannot tell me that I must pay VAT. No. And if you look at it, VAT is on processed items. But water, as it is a very basic item. So they won that case. And so that case law is backing those that are within that business to also say that, okay, this is how far I've gone, this is what I've done, and I'm not going to pay this particular type of tax. They can be hinged on other types of taxes, but not on value-added tax. We have circulars issued, practices by the Inland Revenue, opinions of tax experts and authors, then budget and pronouncement of relevant ministries, then the Constitution of the Federal Republic, which is paramount and gives us the full power gives the tax administrators the full power to collect their taxes. So it is pertinent to note that taxes are collected in order for the government to have adequate funds to run the affairs of the country, the state, as the case may be, for the government to be able to defend her territories, build infrastructure, and also ensure that its civil and public servants are adequately paid their remunerations. Taxes have to be collected as part of the avenues for raising funds. As such, in governance, we must know that tax is of utmost importance and must be collected by government. It should also be noted that payment of tax is a constitutional duty of every citizen, and everyone should abide by this. And as the saying goes in the holy books, give unto Caesar what is for Caesar, and unto God what is for God. On this note, I would say thank you for listening. This is how far we can go on the periphery of taxation, because there's more to taxation than what I've just mentioned. But for now, we would leave it at this. And if you have any questions, I'm open to answer them.
Hey, thank you very much, sir, for that very interesting class. If you have questions, you can raise your hands or put your questions in the chat box. Okay, Ibrahim Jari, I've asked you to unmute and ask your question.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Facilitator, sociologist, turn to tax expert. Thank you very much, sir. My question
an accountant.
is... No, I'm an administrator, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
In spite of all these principles, laws, you'll find that still in Nigeria there are some factors responsible for tax evasion in the country. Probably some of these factors were even highlighted in Adam Smith's canon of taxations. Mostly, some of them are not observed here in Nigeria, such as weak perception of benefit. Many Nigerians feel that feel discontent between tax paid and the quality of government services received. Number two, corruption system, such as in the system. Number three, inefficient tax administration. And number four, high poverty rate. In a situation of economic hardship, the immediate needs to service can be given more attention than the tax payment. What I mean here is high poverty rate, like the situation now in Nigeria. Look at how people are suffering. So this high poverty rate can even be a factor of tax evasion in Nigeria. Okay, what can you say, or what is your view on these factors that are responsible for tax evasion in Nigeria, and how can this be tackled? I mean, how can this be solved by the government? Thank you very much, sir.
All right. Thank you very much. I would take it from a different angle. First things first, anybody that is into business, whatever business it is expected in his books to make provision for taxes. And even in the taxation, you would agree with me that for those that are into corporate businesses, there are capital allowances that the government gives. Even the personal income tax is not hinged on exactly how much you collect. No. I said this is the periphery of taxation. If I'm to take you through the calculations of taxation, you would agree with me that it is a crime to evade tax, because there are a lot of allowances given by the government to make tax very bearable and convenient. For instance, capital allowance is an allowance given to a taxpayer for acquiring a qualified capital asset within a particular tax period, which he is expected to have made in his books. So, for instance, if you are into manufacturing, let's say manufacturing, and you buy a plant and it is worth a particular amount, there is a capital allowance. There is an initial allowance given, And then there's an annual allowance that is being carved out because that property is, that plant is expected to, for instance, stay from, let's say, 5 years. Within those 5 years, there is an allowance that the government gives to the taxpayer who is able to pay less because he has incurred a cost. Now, let me take you to somebody like Dangote, for instance. That's one of the smartest business owners I know for now. In the tax law, there's an allowance for you that if there's a rural allowance, that if your industry is situated where there's no infrastructure, for instance, there is 100% allowance given to you. Do you know why Dangote will come back and tell you that he's going to construct roads? Do you know what that means? Because he has been saved a lot. And so he is ready to give back to the country. So there's a lot we need to understand when it comes to taxation. This is just at the surface of it for us to be aware of, yes, what we are as politicians going to do if we're in the shoes of government. Because mind you, I am taking this class for people who are aspiring to be political office holders, people who want to be advisors, people who want to influence governance in Nigeria. And so if you are looking at it from that angle, you would agree with me that it is very, very good for us to understand it from the legal perspective. That's from the principles and from the tax laws that are backing these taxes. So there's a lot that needs to be done. Now, coming to talk about poverty, I have a different view to that. Because yes, Nigerians are living below the poverty line. That is a known fact. But there are many other factors that have brought about this, which is a discussion for another day. So for now, I don't know if I've answered you, but I think it is not actually because people it's because people don't understand what it takes. That's why they even try to say they want to evade it. Because someone who actually knows that, I have allowances. If I buy this, if I incur that, I have allowances. There are allowable expenses, like your administrative expenses, your salaries, your wages. Even, in fact, let me tell you, as simple as it is, if you collect a loan, the interest on that loan is tax exempt. So unless and until people understand this concept of taxation in Nigeria, we will continue to suffer it until people understand it. And then when people understand it better, I think that it is at that point that the revenue will make more sense and the government will make more money. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Anyone?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much,
hands
sir.
up.
Ibrahim, I believe your question was answered. Okay. Akirele Peters, I've asked you to unmute and ask your question.
Okay, good evening. Thank you very much, Mr. Joseph, for the presentation.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask about, in the objective of this class, you mentioned there are 5 objectives, which is the reason for tax and taxation, the need for government to collect taxes, and up to the 5th one, which is sources of our tax laws in Nigeria. Now, in the class, I noticed you didn't tell us who is eligible to pay tax, who is supposed to pay tax. If there is a age range, if there is a kind of work or kind of income you need to make for you to be able to pay tax. And this brings me to the question that do civil servants, or are civil servants supposed to pay tax, or are political office holders supposed to pay tax? Like our lawmakers who have basic salaries and also have allowances, are they supposed to pay from only their basic salaries if they pay, or are they supposed to pay from net or gross income per month? So please help us shed light to that.
All right. So tax is expected to be paid by every adult citizen above the age of 18, either in business or in employment. Now, when it comes to business, for individual in business, like those who have registered their companies as an enterprise, you are expected to pay the personal income tax. And the personal income tax is calculated in such a way that there's a relief. I think the first relief is 200,000 or 1% of your gross income, whichever is higher. Then there's a grading. Okay, no, then there's a 20% of your gross income that is also exempted from tax. In the past tax laws, we used to have a case of if you have children up to certain ages, if you have children in primary school, secondary school, if you have aged parents, but the government later on amended the law and said, no, let's stick to 200,000 or 1% of your gross plus 20% of your gross income is exempted first. The balance is the accessible profits or income that is now graded. The first 300,000 is at 7%. The next is at 11%. Then the next 300. Then the next 500 is at 15%. The next 500, which now takes us to 1.6 million, is at 19%. Then the next 1.6 million is at 21%. And then above that amount is at 24%. That is graded. That is how it is. Now, civil servants, every civil servant in Nigeria pays his tax. Even companies that have employees are expected to file their personal income tax returns to the closest state inland revenue service for individuals. They pay to state inland revenue service, while the companies pay to federal inland revenue service. Civil servants at the federal level pay at the federal level to the federal inland revenue service, but in their case, because of the state of residence, personal income tax recognizes the state of residence. So there are conflicts within that. That's why we have the Joint Tax Board, which comes to try to harmonize the taxes. We have the case of people living in Ogun, working in Lagos. They will tell you that Ogun State will say they're supposed to be collecting their taxes. Meanwhile, their office is in Lagos. The office is remitting to Lagos Internal Revenue Service. We have those conflicts. We have the case of Abuja and Nasarawa. People living in Karu, Yanya, and will tell you they're in Nasarawa State. Nasarawa State will be disturbing them to pay taxes. Meanwhile, their office in Abuja will tell you, no, I'm paying to FCT IRS. These are cases. Then for those in the armed forces, the military, the police, paramilitary, they all pay to federal inland revenue service under the Personal Income Tax Act. Now, the last one, which you asked, the lawmakers, they are also under the payroll of the federal government. And so it is expected. I cannot categorically tell you I am sure, but it is expected that they pay their taxes directly to the state FCT IRS, because they are all, that's the federal legislators, they are all residents in Abuja. However, for you to come out as a political officer, either as a councillor or what have you, one of the criteria is that you must come with your tax clearance certificates. Now, I will throw it back at you. Is it possible to get a tax clearance certificate if you don't pay your taxes? Hello? All right. Well, it is expected that everyone pays taxes at all levels. So I don't know if I've answered your question. Any more?
Okay, sir. Thank you very much, sir, for that.
Thank you.
Olumide, I've asked you to unmute and ask your question.
All right, good evening. And thank you, Mr. Facilitator, for this wonderful lecture about that. I have a couple of questions, or maybe like three, which you have answered some, but I would like more clarification on this particular one. You talk about a judgment on what an entrepreneur that produces what I said is exempted from VAT. Is it just or it doesn't mean that all these manufacturers that produce bottled water are they exempted from paying paying VAT? That means that they are not charging the consumer VAT when they are buying bottled water. That is one. Two, as a federal worker, if you want to get tax clearance, are you supposed to get it from the state inland revenue service or the federal inland revenue service? That is, we are working with the federal government. Thank you.
All right. Well, the case on that water is because VAT, they said, is supposed to be on consumption of luxury items. You understand? So the case, the man was he was charged by FRS to pay VAT, and he decided to go to the tax appeal tribunal. The tax appeal tribunal still gave FRS the backing that he was expected to pay, and the person went ahead to the appeal court and he won the case. The facts about the case I do not have readily available here, but that was a case that gave him an edge over the federal inland revenue not to pay VAT because he said water is a necessity. And there's no way you expect people to sell water at tap. Would you expect somebody to go under the tap and drink water and pay? No, you have to make it presentable. So you put it in a bottle so that people can buy it. That doesn't make it a luxury item. So the only way people will pay for water, VAT on water, is, for instance, if we go for dinner in Transcorp, I'm available. You can invite me. Let's go to Transcorp for dinner or Echo Hotel. Of course, we are going to pay for VAT on water because a bottle of water there, you said you know how far. So that is the only place you will say that there's still VAT on water. But basic as it is, from the consumer to from the producer to the consumer, it is expected to be at zero rates because there's no way you expect somebody to drink water from the tap. Then for tax clearance for federal worker, if you are resident in a particular state and you work for the federal government, the fact that your payment comes from Abuja, for instance, you are expected to meet your accounts department to follow up on your tax clearance. Now, if they confirm to you that you can go to your state inland revenue service because you are resident in that state, then you can go with your pay slip and some other documents that they will give you, and then you claim for your tax, you apply for your tax clearance, and they will give you.
Hello, sir. What if the state claim that they are not getting remittance from federal government as per the tax docket?
Then the headquarters should be able to get it for you from the FCT IRS because there's no way that, except if there's a fraud somewhere, there's no way that they will not be deducting your taxes for you because every employee has a TIN number. I'm sure you know you have a TIN number. So once you go with your TIN number, you should be able to check and see where your payment goes to. Just the way we have the National Housing Fund deducted at source is the same way the taxes are deducted at source.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
So, yes, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. Oyelowo David, I've asked you to unmute and ask a question.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Yes, sir. My question is on running a business, and I discover with time that running a business is not black and white when it comes to taxes. And I will cite this example is that I know some of our sister companies that when they want to get some contracts with some big names and co like that, there are some people in those big names, they will come to them, see, this contract is 10 million, but we want you to do it for 5 million, but you will write 10 million and we will pay the 10 million into your account. You must give us 5 million back. And the funniest thing is that those junior companies, because they need to make income, they need to work, they will be subjected to take such bills. And when they take it, before you know, the tax, the inland revenue and co will knock on their door after they've done the project and ask them, oh, you collected the contract of 10 million, so come and pay the tax. They don't be like, it's just 5 million naira is the contract I collected. But yes, it is 10 million. And that is where the issue will now start with the dragging and everything. So, sir, my question is, how can business owner navigate that area? Because nowhere, the business owner want to make money. And when they stay for long without contract, they'll be subjected to take it.
Well, I understand your fears. I understand your question. As an accountant, I would say that if you're doing business, there should be transparency. There should be honesty. After saying that, I would also advise that whenever you are in business, if it is going to lead you to a particular problem of that nature, then you must make a provision for that. So you make them understand that there is a provision for taxation. Because if you do a supply, for instance, and you are expected to pay VAT, you must factor in that amount. So if, for instance, I'm giving, this is outside the scope of my lecture, people pay for this consultancy I'm giving you, it is expected that you do an addition of the 7.5% on whatever contract sum, so that at the end of the day, they should deduct the VAT at source, which will come to you as a withholding tax credit note, which you would use to claim against your company's income tax subsequently. So it is only a professional. If you have a professional, the professional can be able to guide you. I am a professional. We can talk outside this class. There's a way around it, but usually you must make a provision for it, whichever way. You don't have to be desperate in business. You have to ensure that every loophole is tied up so that you don't have to go into losses at the end of the day. The purpose of business is profit.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Ama Ewong, I've asked you to unmute and ask a question.
All right. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Yeah. Okay. My name again is Ama Ewong. I understand that there is a big difference between tax evasion and tax leakages when it comes to taxation. And I remember in your opening statement, you made mention of NMPC not remitting revenues to the federal government. Tax is tax. Tax is not revenue. Tax is only revenue when it is collected, when it is in government coffers. That is when it becomes revenue. And I know that there are so many reasons responsible for tax leakages in Nigeria. As an expert, I want you to throw more light, give an advice. What do you think the federal government can do to curb tax leakages? That is my question. Thank you.
Okay, well, when it comes to tax leakages, I look at it from a different perspective. I want to understand you when you quoted my statement about NMPC. NMPC, why I quoted NMPC is part of the sources of income or revenue for government is sales of oil as it is. And NMPC usually remits the proceeds of those sales, either by their joint venture on oil wells for exploration or for sale of crude oil to other countries. Those are all remittances that they make to the federal government. But for certain reasons, that has not been done over the years. Now, when you talk of leakages in taxation. I don't understand specifically what you mean by tax leakages, because when it comes to tax leakages, I would say it is a way in which people use the tax laws to evade taxes. Because, you know, there's a difference between tax planning, tax evasion, and tax avoidance. So some tax planning is legal. Tax avoidance is somewhat illegal and can be legal, but tax evasion is totally cutting off from taxes. Well, my advice, if I must say, is for people to have confidence in the government. And how the government can bring back that confidence is one of the ways is reducing cost of governance. Because a lot of people will tell you that taxpayers' money is going in cost of governance. So I think that is one way in which it is expected that people will gain more confidence in government if this cost of governance is outrightly shown that it has been reduced, so that people will now have more confidence in the government and then they will pay more taxes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do I have any questions?
From me?
Okay, Cletus, you can go ahead and ask your question. Can I see your hands up? I've asked you to unmute.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir, for this wonderful class. My name is my question goes like this. To discuss, as you started, you talked about tax rate, the percentage by workers. You made mention of the first 300,000, the first 100,000, 1.6 million different rates. So my question is, in Nigeria of today, do we have a rate for non-governmental organizations and a rate for government workers? That is my question. That is number one. Two, you talked about if one have to run for any political office, first of all, you have to present your tax clearance certificate. So on this tax clearance certificate, like people that are based in or people that are based in Abuja and are working in Abuja and they are paying their tax to Federal Inland Revenue in Abuja and they have their tax clearance certificate. Going back home to contest for any political position, and you present the tax clearance from the Federal Inland Revenue in Abuja where you were working and you were paying your tax, is it allowed? That is my question. That is my second question, sir. Thank you.
Sorry, it kept breaking. I was not getting you. When you talked about working in Abuja and paying to FIRS, if you're working as an individual and you are not part of the military, you are expected to pay to FCT IRS, not to Federal Inland Revenue Service. And it's not the individual that goes ahead to do the payment. It is the organization where he or she works that would process the payments to the revenue service. But I need to understand your other question about rates or something like that.
Okay. Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. So the other question I made mention of is, the question goes like, if the Nigerian government have different rates for non-governmental organizations, workers, and different rates for government workers? That is my question.
Okay. No, it's the same. If you work But although we have, you see, some of these international organizations or non-governmental organizations have a particular pact with the federal government. If they are coming in, depending on how they came into Nigeria, I think if we are on the same page, workers who work under United Nations, ECOWAS, and FAO, and some other international organizations, they are tax exempt because there's a treaty that brings them into Nigeria. So they are not expected to pay any form of taxes. Non-governmental organizations are not supposed to pay taxes, but they're supposed to file their returns. They're expected to file their returns to the Federal Inland Revenue Service to show that the affairs that they're into is actually non-governmental and non-profit. The moment any kind of profit is seen within that business, then they will be expected to pay taxes on that business that they have taken. But generally, non-governmental organizations, provided they have non-profits, they are not expected to pay taxes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Ibrahim Mustafa, back to mute.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ibrahim Mustafa, calling from Borno State. My questions goes like this. My number one question is, does taxation grow economic? That is number one. Then number two, why is it that as you make mention of the NGOs, I knew vividly some of the NGOs staff, their money have been deducted for taxes in the state level, local government level. Are this tax not in conformity with the laid down principle by the tax law? So I want to be educated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You made mention of tax growing the economy. Well, taxation, as it is, like I mentioned in the beginning, is a form of revenue generating arm. That is the only way. It is the only way government can run its business. Without taxes, a lot of things will not be able to function. Now, in a way, if there's some incentives given to certain businesses to thrive in an economy, it can help the economy. Depending on the fiscal policy of the country or the monetary policy they decide to take, taxation can be used. Because when the government decided to say they were going to grade businesses below 25 million to pay zero taxes on companies' income taxes, while those up to 100 million, from 25 million to 100 million, will pay 20%, and then above 100 million will pay 30%. I think it was in the right direction to support smaller businesses so that they are not burdened by payment of taxes. They will be able to thrive. So in a way, it has a way of helping the economy. Now, concerning you telling me about NGOs being staff of NGOs being taxed, I asked you, I said, I made mention of something. I said, depending on the treaty they have with the government. If the government has a treaty with them, that's why I mentioned ECOWAS, UN, World Bank, WHO, they have an agreement with the Nigerian government, and so their staff are not being taxed. However, we have 1,001 of NGOs in Borno State. You agree with me that there are 1,001 NGOs, which some of them are actually there for one reason or the other. So I will not categorically tell you whether the taxation or the taxing of those staff is in line with government regulations or not, because I am sure that there's a law that is backing whatever collections are being made at that level. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Mustafa, I believe your question was answered. We have one question in the chat box by Godwin. He said, what is the impact of tax on unemployment? How can citizens engage government towards holding government accountable to ensure that taxes are spent adequately?
Well, on this note, I would say that tax is a levy imposed by government with no gratification expected by the populace. So tax is not an exchange of anything. Tax is a compulsory levy. What government does with it, you cannot say they have not used it judiciously. And that is why Nigerian government will always publish its financial statements on the portal of Federal Ministry of Finance under the Office of Accountant General. I'm sure if you go there, you would see the financial statement from whenever to dates. You will see what the government is using the money for. And like I said, the priorities of the government is not necessarily the priority of one group of citizens. You would see people agitating for something. Doesn't mean that government should stop whatever it is doing elsewhere and then focus on just one sector because they feel government is not using taxes. No. It is a compulsory levy backed by law, imposed by a sovereign state, and the citizens do not have, I do not want to say citizens can hold the government responsible for spending taxes anyhow. I don't think I've seen that in any crimes yet. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Amma, your hands are raised again.
Okay, sorry, sir. Let me ask one more question.
Ahead.
Okay,
yes,
thank
please.
you. Yeah, if I heard you correctly, you said there is a subsisting law that businesses whose income is not up to is from 0 naira to 25 million, they have zero tax levy. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Finance Act 2019. Sorry, 2019.
2019. Okay, I think there are instances in some states. Now, before I go ahead, this law, is it applicable to just any business at all, whether the business is operating within the state or the local government or the federal capital territory? Because I know there are instances in some states where there are businesses whose income is not even up to 10 million naira, and the state government or the local government are still collecting taxes from these businesses.
Okay. Let me clarify that.
Okay.
The Federal Inland Revenue Service collects taxes from companies. If you have a company that is a limited liability company registered under CAC as a limited liability company. Sorry, there's a power outage. Thank you. It's a limited liability company. It is under Federal Inland Revenue Service, and it is companies' income tax they will be paying. Now, for businesses under that category that have a turnover of below 25 million, they are expected they are charged at 0% companies' income tax. It does not mean that such company will not pay capital gains tax if it's supposed to pay capital gains tax. It does not mean that they will not pay value-added tax. They are supposed to pay those ones. But for companies' income tax, it is at 0 rates for companies that have a turnover below 25 million. Now, for states that collect taxes, they collect taxes from individuals. Now, if you have an enterprise, if you register your company as an enterprise, a one-man business, me and you enterprise, for instance, if we come into partnership, Amma and Joe and Sons, who are doing business, at the end of the year, we prepare our books and we come up with our profit after all our expenses. That profit will be shared based on your percentage of business, like your share of the business. So if it is a 50-50, we'll do 50-50. If it is a 70-30, we'll do a 70-30 sharing based on our formula of ownership in the business. Now, based on that, each of us, if I live in Abuja, you live in Lagos, for instance, you are expected to pay to your state's inland revenue based on your own profits, share of profits, while I pay my own share in my state of residence. That is for enterprises. So I would say that 0% does not apply to enterprises within a state. No, get it right. It is for companies that are registered as limited liabilities under the Corporate Affairs Commission, and they are being administered by the Federal Inland Revenue Service. I don't know if I've answered your question.
Yes, you have. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Actually, if I can go ahead.
Okay, thank you, sir. You mentioned something that prompted this question. So I'm going to ask that in this generation now that we have people that work remotely, people that do not have tangible work. By tangible, I mean what you can touch, what you can feel. Like
I understand.
there's no
virtual companies.
Okay, yes, like virtual people or content creators. How do these people pay tax? And then if they don't pay, is it a crime? And how do you hold them accountable?
First things first, it's actually a crime to run a business and not pay taxes. Number two is with technology. It has not been perfected, but I'm sure the country, through the various tax administrations, would be able to bridge that gap. It's a new normal. Whether we like it or not, these things have just come to bear, and definitely there are different levels to it. But because they receive their payments via their bank, definitely there's a way the tax authorities can track them and they will still come.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I think we have a question in the chat box.
Okay, can you please read it out?
Charlie, go ahead.
Okay, it's been answered.
Okay, the impact of unemployment tax. Oh yeah, I've answered that.
Yes, answered. Okay, thank you very much, sir. I believe we don't have any more questions again. That was a very interesting and engaging class. Really appreciate. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Joe. It's been
thank you very much.
Engaging class as usual. Thank you for the knowledge shared. Okay, I'll just allow the students to unmute and just tell you thank you before we allow you go.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
I hope I answered your questions rightly.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
sir, for the class.
Thank you very much.
All right. There will be no classes tomorrow. You have just 2 more classes to go, and your graduation is next week Sunday. So, use the free time tomorrow to plan your projects for those that have not carried it out, and to put the finishing touches on it for those that have carried it out. Remember, the deadline is Thursday for the submission of your projects. The deadline grace has been granted. It was supposed to be this weekend, but grace has been granted and shifted to next week. So no party has an excuse. So please make sure that you all meet up with the deadline. And I wish you the best of luck. We have just 1 week to go together. I hope it's been an impactful ride. So see you all next week, and good night.